Sleep Videos TV, mysteries that have never been solved.
Hello and welcome back to Sleep Videos TV. Tonight we are going to drift together into the world of the unexplained, into stories that have kept historians, scientists, and dreamers searching for answers across decades, sometimes across centuries. These are the mysteries that live at the edges of what we know, the cases that don't close neatly, the signals that came once and never returned, the drawings that stretch for miles across ancient desert floors, the sounds only certain ears can hear, the books written in scripts that no one alive can read.
Some of these mysteries have partial answers. Some have theories that feel almost right but never quite settle. And some remain as wide open today as the night they first appeared. But here is what I want you to feel as we move through them together. Mystery is not a frightening thing. Mystery is the natural shape of a universe that is far larger, far older, and far stranger than any of us can fully hold in our minds. Every unanswered question is an open door. Every unsolved case is an invitation, and every strange, half-lit corner of human experience is a reminder that we are explorers in a world that is not finished surprising us. So let yourself settle now, let your shoulders drop and your breathing slow. If you are lying down, feel the weight of your body sinking gently into whatever is holding you. There is nothing you need to do tonight except let these stories carry you. You do not need to solve anything. You do not need to remember anything. You only need to listen and let your mind wander gently through these long corridors of the unknown. If you find yourself drifting off before we reach the end, that is exactly as it should be. These mysteries have waited this long. They will still be here when you wake. Let's begin. The Bermuda Triangle. There is a stretch of water in the western North Atlantic Ocean that has accumulated more stories, more rumors, more theories, and more unanswered questions than almost anywhere else on the surface of the Earth. It doesn't appear on any official government map. The United States Board on Geographic Names does not recognize it as an official region, and yet for more than half a century it has held a place in the collective imagination that no official body could ever take away. We call it the Bermuda Triangle. Picture it first as a shape, a rough triangle drawn across the Atlantic, its three corners touching the southern tip of Florida, the island of Bermuda far to the northeast, and the islands of the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico to the south. Depending on how generously you draw those lines, the triangle covers somewhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million square miles of open ocean. That is an enormous amount of water, warm, deep, and sometimes violent water crossed by some of the busiest shipping and flight routes in the world. The deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean sits within this triangle. It is called the Milwaukee Depth, a hollow in the Puerto Rico Trench that plunges to 27,493 feet below sea level. More than 5 miles straight down, the Gulf Stream, one of the most powerful ocean currents on the planet, rushes through this region, capable of producing sudden and sharp shifts in local weather. The majority of Atlantic tropical storms and hurricanes pass through here. The seafloor is riddled with shallow reefs and sandbars that have wrecked ships for centuries. This is not, in other words, a gentle place. The stories that gave the triangle its mythology begin, depending on who you ask, as far back as 1492. Christopher Columbus, sailing west on his first voyage toward what he believed would be Asia, passed through what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. His logs record something strange. On the night of October 11th, 1492, he and at least one crew member reported seeing a light on the horizon and a flickering glow rising and falling, unlike a star and unlike the lights of any vessel they could identify. Columbus also noted that his compass was behaving oddly, not pointing quite where it should. Whatever he encountered in those waters disturbed him enough to write it down. The phrase Bermuda Triangle itself was coined in 1964 in an article by writer Vincent Gaddis published in a pulp magazine called Argosy. Gaddis connected a series of disappearances in the region and framed them as evidence of some overarching unnatural force at work. By the time author Charles Berlitz published his best-selling book, The Bermuda Triangle, in 1974, the idea had fully embedded itself in popular culture. Berlitz claimed, among other things, that the lost city of Atlantis lay beneath the triangle's waves and that its ancient power sources were still disrupting modern technology. But the actual disappearances, the ships and planes that truly did vanish, deserve careful, unhurried attention. In March 1918, the United States Navy collier USS Cyclops had just loaded a cargo of manganese ore in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She was bound for Baltimore. Her crew of 306 men expected a routine voyage north through the Caribbean. The Cyclops never arrived. She sent no distress signal. No wreckage was ever found. No bodies surfaced. No oil slick appeared on the water. She simply vanished from the historical record. Somewhere between Brazil and the United States, to this day, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops remains the single largest loss of life in United States Navy history that occurred outside of direct combat. The theories that followed were numerous. The ship was known to be unstable and overloaded. Her captain was reportedly erratic. German U-boats were active in the Atlantic in 1918, though Germany examined its records after the war and found no evidence of any such attack. What makes the Cyclops genuinely mysterious is not the disappearance itself. Ships do sink, but the complete and total absence of any trace. The ocean simply closed over her and kept its secret. The most famous of all triangle stories begins on December 5th, 1945, at the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 5 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, designated Flight 19, lifted off into a clear afternoon sky for a routine navigational training exercise. The flight was scheduled to last about 3 hours. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, an experienced pilot with 2,500 hours of flight time. About an hour and a half into the flight, something went wrong. Taylor radioed the tower. His compasses, he said, were malfunctioning. He was not sure where he was. The transmissions that followed were fragmented and deeply troubling. Taylor believed they were somewhere over the Florida Keys, far to the west of their actual position. Based on that incorrect belief, he turned the flight east, which was actually out over the open Atlantic rather than toward land. The weather was deteriorating. the transmissions grew less frequent. At around 6 in the evening, 14 men and 5 aircraft vanished from the face of the ocean. A rescue plane, a Martin PBM Mariner with 13 men aboard, took off to search for them. It also never came back. A ship in the area reported seeing an explosion in the sky at roughly the location and time the Mariner would have been flying. The Mariner was prone to fuel leaks and almost certainly exploded mid-air, a tragic accident. As for Flight 19, no aircraft, no bodies, and no definitive wreckage were ever found. The most reasonable reconstruction suggests that Taylor's compass problems, real or perceived, combined with worsening weather, led him to make a series of decisions that carried the flight farther and farther from land. When the planes ran out of fuel, they went down over deep ocean. But the completeness of the disappearance, the total absence of any recoverable trace of 5 aircraft and 14 men, is what keeps the case genuinely open. And then there is the story of the witchcraft. December 22nd, 1967, Christmas lights glittered along the Miami shoreline. A man named Dan Burrick invited a friend aboard his 23-foot luxury cabin cruiser to admire the holiday lights from the water. The plan was simple. Motor a short distance offshore, switch off the engine, enjoy the scenery. At 9 that evening, Miami Coast Guard received a call from Burrick. He was calm. He said the boat had struck something in the water and would need a tow from less than a mile offshore. He gave his position clearly. He said there was no danger. No one was hurt. The Coast Guard dispatched a vessel immediately. They reached the given location in 19 minutes. The witchcraft was not there. They searched the surrounding area thoroughly. No boat, no debris, no oil slick, no life jackets, nothing. The witchcraft had been specifically designed with flotation that made it virtually unsinkable. It had flares, it had life preservers. Burrick was an experienced boater who knew those waters well, and yet within the span of 19 minutes between a calm, routine distress call and the arrival of the Coast Guard, 2 men and an unsinkable boat disappeared without a single trace. Now let us step back from the individual cases and look at what the evidence actually shows. The United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has stated clearly that there is no evidence that mysterious disappearances occur with any greater frequency in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other large, well-traveled area of the ocean. Lloyd's of London does not charge higher premiums for vessels passing through the triangle. A 2013 study by the World Wildlife Fund examining the world's most dangerous shipping routes did not include the Bermuda Triangle among the 10 most hazardous. Researcher Larry Kusha, who spent years in the 1970s checking the Triangle's most famous cases against original records, found that many popular accounts involved significant inaccuracies. Ships said to have vanished in calm conditions had actually gone down in storms. Some incidents attributed to the Triangle happened nowhere near its commonly accepted boundaries. One plane described as disappearing mysteriously over the Triangle had actually crashed off Daytona Beach in front of hundreds of witnesses. What does explain the genuine disappearances? The Gulf Stream carries wreckage enormous distances, very quickly dispersing it across hundreds of miles within days. The region's waters range from shallow, reef-covered banks where ships can ground in seconds to ocean trenches 5 miles deep where sunken vessels may never be found. Methane hydrate deposits on the regional seafloor could theoretically, under rare destabilization conditions, reduce the buoyancy of the water above them, though this has not been definitively linked to any specific disappearance. The Bermuda Triangle is not a portal. It is not a place where the laws of physics suspend themselves, but it is a place where the ocean has kept some of its secrets more tenaciously than others. The Cyclops left no trace of 306 souls. The Witchcraft vanished in 19 minutes. Flight 19 flew into the declining afternoon and was gone. The ocean is very good at keeping secrets, and this particular stretch has chosen to keep some of its secrets very well. The Dyatlov Pass. There is a mountain in the northern Ural range in Russia that goes by 2 names. On official maps, it is called Kholat Syakhl. In the language of the indigenous Mansi people of the region, that translates to Dead Mountain. Among the investigators who have spent decades trying to understand what happened there, on the night of February 1st and 2nd, 1959, it is simply called Dyatlov Pass, named for the young man who led 9 students into its shadow and never brought them home. The story of the Dyatlov Pass incident is one of the most thoroughly documented, most exhaustively investigated, and most stubbornly mysterious tragedies in the history of mountain exploration. The Russian government reopened its official investigation in 2019, 60 years after the events, only to conclude once again that no fully definitive explanation could be established with certainty. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old in the winter of 1959 and studying at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. He was an experienced hiker and skier who had organized many successful winter expeditions. For this journey, he assembled a group of 9 people, 8 fellow students and 1 older man, Semyon Zolotaryov, who was 38 and working toward a master's certificate in ski instruction. All of them were competent, experienced winter campers. This was not a group of novices walking into conditions they had not encountered before. The journey they planned, a 300-kilometer ski trek through the northern Urals, was ambitious but well within their demonstrated abilities. A 10th member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to joint pain. It was the luckiest decision of his life. The group kept detailed diaries and took photographs. The images show a group that appears happy, energetic, and in high spirits, joking around, clearly enjoying themselves, even as the terrain grew more challenging. On February 1st, they began climbing the slope of Kholat Syakhl. The wind was picking up, visibility dropping, and at some point Dyatlov made a navigational error. Rather than push down into the sheltered valley beyond the slope in deteriorating weather, the group made camp on the exposed hillside, planning to descend in the morning when conditions improved. They dug a platform in the snow, set up their tent, arranged their equipment, cooked a meal, and went to sleep. They were never seen alive again. 26 days passed before the alarm was raised when searchers reached the slope of Kholat Syakhl on February 26th. They found the tent almost immediately, and everything about it was wrong. The tent was partially collapsed under blown snow, but the most disturbing thing was not its condition. It was the cuts. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, not torn by any external force, not open through the zipper, but cut outward in multiple places by someone inside. Whatever had caused the 9 hikers to cut through the walls of their shelter and flee into a winter night that was at least -5 degrees Fahrenheit had happened so suddenly, so urgently, that they had left without their shoes. The footprints leading away from the tent showed a group moving at a walking pace, not running downhill toward the tree line about 1.5 miles away. Some of the footprints showed bare feet, others showed socks, a few showed 1 boot. The first 2 bodies were found 500 meters from the tent, near a large cedar tree. They had died of hypothermia, but they were dressed only in their underwear, nearly naked in temperatures that should have been immediately fatal. Their hands showed signs they had tried to climb the cedar, perhaps to see over the tree line or look for the tent. Near them, the branches of the cedar were broken as high as 16 feet off the ground. Farther up the slope, heading back toward the tent, 3 more bodies were found. Igor Dyatlov himself, face up in the snow, his hands raised as if shielding himself. 2 others in poses consistent with someone who had been crawling uphill toward the tent when they died. All 3 had died of hypothermia, but one of them, Rustem Slobodin, had a fracture in his skull, a crack that investigators concluded could not have been caused simply by falling in the snow. The remaining 4 bodies were not found until May, when the spring thaw revealed what had been buried under heavy snow accumulation in a ravine about 75 meters from the cedar tree. These 4 had suffered injuries of a completely different magnitude. 2 had severe skull fractures. Others had multiple broken ribs on both sides. The force required to produce injuries like these, both physicians at the time and subsequent forensic analysis agreed was enormous, comparable to what one might see in a major car crash rather than a fall. Something had applied extreme crushing force, and Lyudmila Dubinina's tongue was missing. The medical examiner attributed this to post-mortem decomposition and animal activity during the months before the bodies were found. Others have never been comfortable with that explanation. There was one more strange detail. The clothing of some of the hikers showed traces of radiation, specifically beta radiation. The levels were above background, but not dramatically life-threatening. Nuclear testing was active in the Urals region in the 1950s, and this may well have been environmental contamination picked up during the hike. But it sits in the record unexplained. The official verdict in 1959 read that the cause of death was a compelling natural force that the hikers had been unable to overcome. It was, as a conclusion, almost admirably honest in its vagueness. The avalanche theory has been the most persistent official explanation. In 2019, Russian authorities concluded that a slab avalanche, a type of snowslide in which a dense top layer breaks away from softer snow below, most likely caused the group to flee their tent. A 2021 study published in the journal Communications, Earth and Environment used computer modeling to show how a combination of the slope's topography, the cut made in the snowpack to install the tent, and subsequent wind-blown snow accumulation could have caused a small but powerful slab to release hours after the group went to sleep. Such a slab, under the right conditions, could produce the crushing injuries observed. The avalanche theory has its defenders and its determined critics. Experienced hikers who have visited the site say the slope is not steep enough for an avalanche of the type described. The footprints leading away from the tent showed a normal walking pace, not people fleeing collapsing snow. The 1959 investigators themselves dismissed the avalanche theory for lack of surface evidence, and the critics point to details the avalanche theory struggles to explain: the missing tongue, the radiation, the strange lighting reported in the sky. Multiple independent witnesses, including personnel from the Meteorological Service and the military, reported seeing unusual orange spheres of light in the sky over the northern Urals on the nights of February and March 1959. These reports were noted and then officially dismissed. Years later, the original lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, published an article admitting that his investigation had no rational explanation for the incident. He also revealed that after his team reported their sightings of the mysterious spheres, he received direct orders from high-ranking regional officials to remove those reports from the record. Whatever those orders were meant to protect, whatever those spheres were or were not, they represent one more detail in a case already full of details that don't fit cleanly into any frame. The families of the 9 hikers never stopped asking for answers. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, carried his grief and his questions for the rest of his life. He died in 2013 at age 75 without receiving the answer he deserved. Dead Mountain keeps its secret still. The Nazca Lines. If you were to fly over the Nazca Desert in southern Peru and look out the window at the right moment, you would see something that would stop your breath. Scratched into the surface of the desert, covering nearly 50 square kilometers, are lines. Thousands of them. Some run perfectly straight for miles across the pale earth. Some form geometric shapes, triangles, rectangles, spirals, trapezoids, and some reveal themselves as something more: enormous drawings of animals and plants, some of them stretching for 200 meters or more from tip to tail. A hummingbird with outstretched wings, a spider with long articulated legs, a monkey with an intricately coiled tail, an orca, a condor, a pair of human hands, a figure that has been called an astronaut by people with creative imaginations, though it most likely represents a human being in ritual dress. These are the Nazca Lines. They were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994. They have been studied, mapped, measured, and debated for nearly 100 years. And their purpose, why an ancient civilization chose to create enormous drawings visible primarily from the air in a desert almost nobody crossed, remains one of the most fascinating open questions in all of archaeology. The how, it turns out, is far less mysterious than the mythology suggests. The Nazca Lines were created by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert floor, revealing the yellowish-gray soil beneath. The lines are not deep, typically between 10 and 30 centimeters below the surrounding surface. The region receives so little rain, about 120 minutes per year and is swept by such consistent winds that the exposed lighter soil has remained visible for more than 2,000 years. The environment that seems so hostile turns out to have been the perfect preservation system. As for the geometric precision, the perfectly straight lines running for miles, researchers discovered decades ago that these could be achieved with simple tools and basic surveying techniques. Wooden stakes have been found at the ends of some lines, consistent with their use as anchor points for stretched strings. An American investigator named Joe Nickel actually reproduced the figures in the early 21st century, using only the tools available to the Nazca people, and proved that a small team could accurately create even the largest figures within days without any aerial assistance. The mystery of the Nazca lines is not how they were made. The mystery is why. The Nazca lines were created primarily by the Nazca culture, a pre-Inca civilization that flourished in southern Peru from roughly 200 BC to 600 AD. These were not primitive people. The Nazca were sophisticated agriculturalists who built an extensive system of underground aqueducts, some still functioning today, to bring water from the Andes to their dry coastal settlements. They were skilled weavers and potters whose work shows a consistent visual vocabulary of animals, plants, and geometric shapes that appears repeatedly on their ceramics, their textiles, and yes, the desert floor. The question of why the Nazca created these enormous drawings has occupied scholars for nearly a century. The first serious scholar to study the lines was the American historian Paul Kosok, who flew over them in 1941. He observed that one of the lines was aligned with the position of the sun at the winter solstice, and proposed that the lines served as a kind of astronomical calendar. This theory was developed for decades by the German mathematician Maria Reich, who spent much of her adult life in the desert studying and mapping the lines. But in 1967, the astrophysicist Gerald Hawkins ran a systematic computer analysis of the line's alignments and found no statistically significant correlation with celestial bodies. The astronomical theory, while elegant, did not hold up. The theory that currently has the most archaeological support connects the lines not to the sky, but to the earth, specifically to water. National Geographic explorer in residence Johann Reinhard concluded that the lines were most likely related to rituals performed to obtain water and agricultural fertility. The region receives almost no rainfall, and water was existentially important to survival there. Many of the straight lines lead to points where surface water enters river valleys. The spiral designs throughout the complex are associated with water in Andean religious symbolism. The animal figures, spiders as rain predictors, hummingbirds as fertility symbols, monkeys as creatures of the water-rich Amazon, are all connected in Andean cosmology to the desire for water. Researcher Anthony Aveni concluded that the straight lines and trapezoids were walked during rituals, that they were not pictures to be observed from above, but paths to be traveled on foot by processions performing ceremonies designed to bring rain and agricultural prosperity. The lines never cross each other and typically have different starting and ending points, consistent with the idea that they were routes rather than pictures. In 2024, a team from Japan's Yamagata University, working with IBM Research, used artificial intelligence to analyze drone and satellite imagery and confirmed 303 previously unknown figurative geoglyphs, bringing the total number of known figures to over 358. These newly discovered figures were smaller and harder to see, depicting parrots, cats, killer whales, and remarkably, several images of severed heads. The Nazca people practiced ritual trophy head collection, and the presence of severed head imagery among the animal geoglyphs suggests a religious significance still being worked out. And then there is the theory that refuses to die. Ancient astronauts. Erich von Däniken's 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods, proposed that the Nazca lines were landing strips for extraterrestrial spacecraft. The book sold tens of millions of copies and has never gone out of print. The theory has been comprehensively demolished by archaeologists. The simple tool recreation of the figures, the wooden stakes, the cultural context of the existing Nazca visual vocabulary all point overwhelmingly to entirely human creators using entirely human methods. But the desire to see in these enormous desert drawings a contact with something beyond ourselves has proven remarkably resistant to evidence. Perhaps that tells us something. Perhaps the reason we keep reaching for extraordinary explanations for the Nazca lines is that the ordinary one is itself extraordinary enough. Human beings 2,000 years ago, using sticks and strings and their own feet, created something of such scale and precision that it took a 20th century airplane to see it properly. Those lines are still there in the desert, patient as the stones themselves, still holding whatever secrets their makers placed inside them. The Tao's hum. Imagine waking in the middle of the night to a sound, not a sharp sound, not a startling one, nothing that makes you sit up straight in bed, something low, persistent, a throbbing, droning murmur at the bottom of your hearing, like a diesel engine idling very far away. You lie there and listen. It is there at midnight. It is there at 3 in the morning. It is there the night after and the night after that. You mention it to your neighbor. She has no idea what you are talking about. This is the experience of a small but determined percentage of people who live in and around the town of Taos, New Mexico, and it has a name. The Taos hum. What makes it so genuinely strange is that nobody can find what is making it, and only a fraction of the people in the affected area can hear it at all. Taos sits in the high desert of northern New Mexico at an elevation of roughly 7,000 feet, about 60 miles north of Santa Fe. It is a small, quiet city, population around 5,000, surrounded by the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east and the Rio Grande Gorge to the west. It is by any measure a quiet place. Reports of the hum began in earnest in the early 1990s. Residents described a persistent low-frequency sound hovering somewhere between 32 and 80 hertz that seemed to come from no identifiable source, was most noticeable at night and in quiet indoor environments, and was not audible to everyone. The people who could hear it described it as maddening, sleep disruption, headaches, anxiety, the relentless presence of a sound with no off switch. Several people reported it was actually louder inside their homes than outside, which is the opposite of how external noise normally behaves. By 1993, complaints had reached sufficient volume that a multi-institution scientific investigation was organized. Researchers from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, Phillips Air Force Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico descended on Taos with sensitive microphones, seismographs, and electromagnetic field detectors. They ran their instruments during periods when residents were actively reporting the hum. They found nothing unusual, no anomalous acoustic signals, no significant seismic activity that would account for a constant throbbing sound, some elevated electromagnetic field levels near power lines, but no established causal connection. The investigation was thorough, professional, and inconclusive. One quietly striking finding when researchers asked different hearers to describe the hum's characteristics, the descriptions were not uniform. Different people reported it at different frequencies within the 32 to 80 hertz range. Some described a hum, others a throb, a pulse, a whir, or a rumble. The research suggested not one Taos hum, but perhaps several different sounds or several different perceptions of the same underlying thing. Only about 2% of the area's population reported being able to hear it. That 2% was roughly equally divided between men and women. One hearer reported that the sound followed them across a range of approximately 30 miles, which is a profoundly strange thing for a sound with an external source to do. The leading hypotheses divide roughly into external and internal sources. External sources, things actually happening in the environment, include industrial equipment, ventilation systems, distant compressors, and natural gas pipelines at high pressure. In similar investigations of hum phenomena elsewhere in the world, including the Bristol hum in England and the Windsor hum on the border of Ontario and Michigan, researchers have occasionally traced the sound to specific industrial facilities. When the source was identified and controlled, some residents reported improvement, but not all. Even in cases where a real external low-frequency source was found, a portion of the affected population continued to report hearing the hum after the source was silenced. This points toward internal sources, perceptual processes occurring within the hearer. The most likely candidate is spontaneous autoacoustic emissions. The inner ear is not a passive receiver. It is an active, complex system that in some people can generate sounds on its own, particularly low-frequency tones related to the mechanisms underlying tinnitus. A particularly sensitive inner ear, or one that has developed a resonant response to certain environmental frequencies, might perceive a low-frequency tone that others cannot detect. There is also the possibility that some people are genuinely more sensitive to infrasound, frequencies below the nominal lower threshold of human hearing at around 20 hertz. Infrasound passes through walls more easily than higher frequency sound, which might account for the indoor amplification effect. Large geological events, atmospheric pressure changes, and distant industrial processes can all generate infrasound. Whether human ears can detect it and whether that detection translates into the conscious perception of a hum is still an area of active research. What is worth sitting with is the human experience at the center of this mystery. The people who hear the Taos hum are not imagining things in the dismissive sense. Something is happening to them, a persistent, genuine, perceptual experience that disrupts their sleep and frays their nerves. Whether the origin is out in the world or somewhere in the extraordinary complexity of their own auditory systems, it is real to them. And the fact that science cannot yet cleanly identify its source is not a failure of the people reporting it. It is a frontier in our understanding of how the physical world and the human body interact. The hum rolls on, low and constant in the quiet high desert. 2% of the people who live there know it well. The rest sleep through it or simply cannot hear it, and science is still listening. Ball lightning. You are inside your home during a thunderstorm. The rain is heavy on the windows and the lightning has been close. You are in the kitchen or the living room and then through the wall, or sometimes witnesses say through the solid glass of a closed window without breaking it. There floats a ball of light. It might be the size of a golf ball. It might be as large as a basketball. It is glowing steadily, perhaps blue or orange or pale yellow, and it moves through the air with a deliberateness that wind could not explain. Slowly, horizontally, tracing an unhurried path across the room before vanishing, either silently winking out or departing with a sharp pop, and sometimes leaving behind the lingering smell of ozone or sulfur. You saw it. You are perfectly sane. And when you describe it to people later, you receive a particular expression in return, the one reserved for people who have said something that falls just outside the edges of the normally acceptable. This experience has been reported by hundreds of people across dozens of countries over hundreds of years. It is called ball lightning. It is one of the most extensively documented, unusual atmospheric phenomena in human history, and it is remarkably still not fully understood by science. The earliest known written description comes from an English monk in the year 1195. He described a dense and dark cloud that produced a white substance shaped into a sphere from which a fiery globe fell toward a river. The language is archaic, but the shape of the description, a glowing sphere associated with thunderstorm conditions, is strikingly consistent with accounts collected centuries later. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia reportedly witnessed ball lightning in a church in St. Petersburg, describing a ball of fire about the size of a head that floated through the church just above the floor, passed between people without harming them, then rose toward the ceiling and disappeared with a sharp noise. Multiple people present confirmed the account. Pilots have reported ball lightning entering aircraft cockpits through windows, not breaking them, simply passing through and moving through the cabin before exiting or dissipating. Ball lightning has reportedly been observed inside submarines. A 1973 university study examined 50 reported cases and found that the phenomenon appeared almost exclusively during thunderstorms or in the immediate aftermath of lightning strikes. For most of the 19th and early 20th centuries, mainstream physics was skeptical that ball lightning existed at all. The skepticism softened considerably in the 1960s and 1970s. As the sheer volume of reports from credible witnesses, trained scientists, military personnel, airline pilots became harder to explain away, the scientific community gradually moved toward cautious acceptance that ball lightning was almost certainly a real physical phenomenon, even if its mechanisms were not understood. Several serious hypotheses have been proposed. The plasma hypothesis suggests that ball lightning forms when a lightning strike ionizes atmospheric gases, creating a self-sustaining ball of hot, glowing plasma. The challenge is that plasma disperses extremely rapidly at room temperature and cannot maintain a coherent spherical form for the seconds or minutes that witnesses describe. The silicon nanoparticle hypothesis, which gained significant support from research published in Physical Review letters, proposes that when lightning strikes sandy or silica-rich soil, it vaporizes silicon. The silicon vapor rises, reacts with oxygen, and creates a slowly oxidizing cloud of microscopic particles that glows as it releases energy. This theory accounts for some reported characteristics but cannot easily explain. Ball lightning observed passing through glass windows. A theory proposed by Australian scientist John Locke focuses specifically on the through-window observations. Locke suggests that during a thunderstorm, a stream of ions accumulates on the outside of a glass window. The resulting electric field acting through the glass excites the air molecules on the interior, creating a glowing ball of excited plasma inside the room. This would explain why ball lightning sometimes appears to pass through glass without breaking it, because it doesn't actually pass through, but is instead created on the interior side by forces acting from outside. One study suggested that as many as half of all ball lightning sightings might be visual experiences caused by the intense magnetic fields generated during electrical storms, that these fields could directly stimulate the visual cortex and create the perception of a glowing sphere. This explanation has attracted significant criticism, but it is not entirely without scientific grounding. What scientists generally agree on today is that ball lightning almost certainly exists as a real physical phenomenon, that it probably has more than one physical cause. Different reports may be describing slightly different things, and that no single explanation currently accounts for all of its reported characteristics. The next time a thunderstorm rolls in and you find yourself inside watching the lightning paint the sky, spare a thought for the possibility that somewhere, in some room adjacent to somewhere, a quiet sphere of glowing light might be floating through the air, following no particular course, owing no explanation to anyone, burning for a few slow seconds before it simply decides to be gone. The Voynich manuscript. In the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, there is a book. It is roughly 9 by 6 inches, written on vellum, the prepared skin of a calf, and it contains 240 pages. It is illustrated with hundreds of drawings, botanical illustrations of plants that look almost familiar but don't quite match any known species. Astronomical diagrams filled with strange symbols, pages of naked women bathing in pools connected by elaborate plumbing, and throughout all of it, text, page after page of neat, confident, flowing script, a script that no one can read. The book is called the Voynich manuscript, named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-American bookseller who purchased it in 1912 from a collection of books near Rome. Voynich recognized immediately that he had something unusual. The script matched nothing in any known alphabet. Its language, if it was a language, corresponded to nothing he or anyone else could identify. It has been studied by professional cryptographers, linguists, computer scientists, and historians for more than 100 years. And as of today, the Voynich manuscript remains completely undeciphered. The vellum has been carbon dated. The dating performed at the University of Arizona in 2009 placed the creation of the pages between 1404 and 1438, the early 15th century during the Italian Renaissance. stylistic analysis of the illustrations and script has led most researchers to suggest the manuscript was composed in Italy during this period. Its earliest verified owner was Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor who collected it in the early 17th century. Rudolph was a famously unconventional ruler, deeply fascinated by alchemy, astrology, and occult philosophy. He reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for the book, roughly equivalent to $90,000 today, suggesting that even then it was recognized as something remarkable. The text itself, when analyzed statistically, exhibits properties consistent with a real language rather than random character strings. It follows patterns of letter frequency and word length that are characteristic of natural languages. A property called Zipf's law, in which the most common word is roughly twice as frequent as the second most common, and so on in a declining sequence. Random strings of symbols do not follow this law. Most natural languages do. The Voynich text does. The words also show properties of real linguistic structure. Certain character combinations appear together reliably, others never. The kind of phonotactic rules that govern which sounds can follow which other sounds in any given language. Different sections of the manuscript show different statistical profiles consistent with a text genuinely about different subjects rather than decorative nonsense. Modern analysis suggests as many as 5 distinct scribes worked on the manuscript. In September 2024, the Beinica Library released multispectral scans of 10 pages, images taken under different wavelengths of light that can reveal details invisible to the eye. These scans showed traces of underlying text that appears to have been erased or overwritten in several places, suggesting a process of revision and correction consistent with real writing. The dominant theories divide into 3 camps. The natural language theory holds that the manuscript is written in some real language, perhaps a rare dialect, perhaps a constructed language, encoded using an invented alphabet. The cipher theory holds that a known language has been systematically concealed through some substitution or rearrangement scheme. During World War II, some of history's greatest professional cryptographers, people who had successfully broken the most complex military codes of the era, turned their attention to the Voynich manuscript. They made no progress. The hoax theory holds that the manuscript has no meaning at all, that it was fabricated by skilled scribes to create the illusion of a coded text without encoding anything. Perhaps it was made to sell to a wealthy, credulous collector fascinated by occult mysteries. Maintaining a convincing statistical illusion of language across 240 pages would have required remarkable skill and sustained effort, but it is not impossible. In 2024, an academic paper proposed that the manuscript was a medical text about women's health, specifically gynecology and obstetrics, enciphered by a medieval German physician named Johannes Hartlieb to protect sensitive knowledge. Hartlieb is known to have written about the encipherment of medical knowledge. The theory remains one of dozens of proposed interpretations, but its grounding in a historical figure with documented relevant interests gives it a degree of specificity that many Voynich theories lack. What is particularly interesting about the Voynich manuscript's undeciphered state is that it is not for lack of effort. It has attracted some of the finest analytical minds of the past century. Its sits in one of the world's great academic libraries, freely accessible, its digital scans available online to anyone who wishes to try. The pattern repeats. A plausible-seeming partial translation attracts brief attention, then is found to require too many special assumptions and too many inconsistencies, a book that will not speak its meaning. 600 years of silence maintained in the face of every method human ingenuity has brought to bear. Someone once knew what those words meant. Perhaps they are the only ones who ever will. The wow signal. On the night of August 15, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was pointed at the sky, listening. This was its purpose. For 22 years, from 1973 until 1995, the Big Ear participated in one of the longest-running searches for extraterrestrial intelligence ever conducted, systematically sweeping the sky, recording radio frequencies, and printing the results as long columns of numbers and letters on paper printouts. The intensity of radio signals was recorded on a scale. Low signals as numbers from 1 to 9, then letters for higher intensities, A for 10, B for 11, and so on. On an ordinary evening, the printout would show mostly numbers from 1 to 3. A signal reaching the letter range was practically unheard of. On August 15, 1977, the Big Ear recorded a signal that printed as 6EQUJ5, starting at 1, rising through the numbers to 6, then into letters EQU, reaching a peak of U, which represented an intensity 30 times above background noise, a level the telescope had never recorded from any natural source. Then falling back down, J, then 5, then back to nothing. The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, which was precisely the duration of one complete observation window, the time it took the Earth's rotation to carry the stationary telescope's field of view through any given point in the sky. Astronomer Jerry Amon reviewed the printout a few days later. He circled the sequence with a red pen. In the margin, he wrote a single word that would give this signal its permanent name: wow. The signal was not remarkable simply because it was strong. It was remarkable because of the specific combination of characteristics it displayed, each of which aligned precisely with what SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, scientists had predicted an artificial radio transmission might look like. The signal appeared to come from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It was a narrowband signal concentrated in a very specific frequency range at approximately 1,420 megahertz. This frequency corresponds to the natural emission frequency of neutral hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. Scientists had long theorized that any civilization wishing to broadcast a signal detectable to other civilizations would likely choose the hydrogen line as a universal beacon. It is the cosmic equivalent of choosing a common language. The signal also showed the characteristic rise and fall pattern expected of a point source being carried through the telescope's field of view by Earth's rotation, exactly the signature of something broadcasting steadily from a fixed point in deep space, and then it stopped. The 72 seconds ended. The Big Ear moved on. The signal was never detected again. In the weeks following the discovery, the Big Ear was pointed repeatedly at the region of Sagittarius from which the signal appeared to originate. Nothing in the months and years that followed other radio telescopes, including the far more sensitive Arecibo Observatory, searched for any repeat. Nothing. The WOW signal remained a single event in 47 years of radio sky surveys, never duplicated, never explained. The signal's status as a potential extraterrestrial contact has both attracted and frustrated researchers for decades. The attraction is obvious. It has precisely the characteristics that SETI researchers predicted they would want to see. The frustration is equally obvious. A genuine communication from another civilization ought to be repeatable. A signal that appears once in 47 years is not a very effective way to communicate. Various natural explanations have been proposed. Comets with their clouds of hydrogen-rich gas were suggested in 2017 as a possible source. A comet passing through the telescope's field of view, producing a burst of hydrogen emission at 1,420 megahertz. This theory was examined and found wanting by most of the SETI scientific community. In 2024, a research team led by astrobiologist Abel Mendez at the Planetary Habitability Laboratory of the University of Puerto Rico at Arecibo published a study proposing a new natural explanation. The team had been searching archived data from the Arecibo Observatory for signals similar to the WOW signal and found several, much weaker but with similar frequency and pattern characteristics scattered across the sky. The fact that similar signals appeared in multiple widely separated locations suggested a natural origin. The explanation they proposed involves a massa event, a process similar to a laser but for microwave radio waves triggered in a cloud of neutral hydrogen by a powerful background source such as a flaring neutron star or magnetar. When such a source passes behind a hydrogen cloud, its intense radiation can excite the hydrogen molecules to emit a brief, very bright burst of radio waves at precisely 1,420 megahertz. The event is transient, rare, and requires an exact alignment of the background source, the hydrogen cloud, and the observing telescope. But when it occurs, it would produce a narrowband, intense, brief signal with exactly the characteristics of the WOW signal. The research team was careful not to claim their explanation definitively solved the mystery. As the lead researcher noted, their results give the clearest picture yet of what the WOW signal might have been and where it came from, without fully closing the case. The WOW signal remains, as of today, the most tantalizing single data point in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It arrived once from the general direction of Sagittarius, precisely at the frequency of the cosmos's most abundant element, at an intensity 30 times above background, lasting exactly as long as the telescope could watch. And then it was gone. Whether it was a natural astrophysical event of extraordinary rarity or whether it was something else entirely remains genuinely open. The answer is somewhere in the sky. We are still listening. The Roanoke colony. In 1587, English settlers established a colony on Roanoke Island off what is now the coast of North Carolina. It was the third English attempt to establish a permanent settlement in the Americas, organized by Sir Walter Raleigh and led by a man named John White. The expedition included 117 men, women, and children. Among them was White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, who gave birth to a daughter named Virginia Dare on August 18, 1587, the first English child born in the Americas. Within a month of their arrival, supplies were running low. John White sailed back to England to secure provisions and reinforcements. He planned to return within months. He did not return for 3 years. His delayed return was partly due to the threat of the Spanish Armada, which occupied England's naval resources in 1588, and partly due to the general disorganization of Raleigh's enterprise. When White finally reached Roanoke Island in August 1590, he found the settlement abandoned. The colonists were gone, all of them. Not a body, not a sign of violence, not a rushed departure. The wooden structures of the settlement had been carefully dismantled, not destroyed, dismantled, suggesting the colonists had taken them apart deliberately before leaving. Most of their possessions were gone too, taken rather than left behind. On a wooden post at the entrance to the settlement, someone had carved a single word, Croatoan. On a nearby tree, the letters Kro had been carved. White and the colonists had agreed before his departure that if they needed to move, they would carve the name of their destination. If they left under duress, they would also carve a cross. There was no cross. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and also the name of a friendly local indigenous community. White was convinced the colonists had moved there voluntarily. He was unable to reach Croatoan Island to investigate. A storm drove his ships away, and when he returned to England, he was never able to organize another voyage to find the settlers. The lost colony of Roanoke has been studied and debated ever since. Archaeological excavations on Roanoke and Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island, have found English artifacts, including a signet ring consistent with one belonging to a member of the original colony. The Lumbee people of the region have traditions that speak of integration with early English settlers and have long claimed partial descent from the Roanoke colonists. The most broadly accepted explanation today is that the colonists, after White's departure, moved to Hatteras Island and were absorbed over time into the local Croatoan community through intermarriage and integration. A practical, rational choice given their circumstances. Genetic and archaeological work in the region is ongoing and may eventually tell a more complete story. But for now, those carved letters on a post, Croatoan, remain one of the most evocative clues in American history. A message left in wood on an island that European maps were still learning to draw by 117 people who stepped off the edge of the known world and did not come back. The message tells us where they went. It does not tell us what happened next. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered the wreck of a Roman-era cargo ship on the seafloor. The wreck contained bronze and marble statuary, glassware, pottery, and other luxury goods likely bound for Rome in the 1st century BC. Among the items brought to the surface was a corroded lump of bronze that did not immediately attract much attention. When examined at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens in the following years, it became clear that this was no ordinary object. X-ray examination and later computer tomography scanning revealed it to be a mechanism of extraordinary complexity, an analog computing device made of bronze gears, at least 30 of them, designed to calculate and display the positions of the sun and moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the positions of the known planets, and indicate the dates of the Pan-Hellenic Games, a 4-year cycle including the Olympics. The Antikythera mechanism can accurately predict eclipses using the 18 1/3 year Saros cycle. It accounts for the elliptical orbit of the moon, which causes the moon to appear slightly different in size depending on its orbital position, using a pin-in-slot mechanism of remarkable engineering elegance. It was handheld, roughly the size of a shoebox. It used principles of mechanical computation that would not be formally rediscovered and applied in similar devices for more than 1400 years. Nothing like it has ever been found from the ancient world. No text from the period describes a device of this kind. The people who made it clearly had a level of understanding of astronomy and mechanical engineering that the historical record had not previously suggested was available in the ancient Greek world. The consensus is that the mechanism was made in the Greek-speaking world around 150 BC by craftsmen with deep knowledge of both astronomy and mechanical engineering. The island of Rhodes has been suggested as its place of origin, partly because the astronomer Hipparchus, who worked there in the 2nd century BC, made theoretical contributions to exactly the kind of astronomical modeling the mechanism performs. What remains mysterious is not the mechanism itself. We understand now reasonably well how it worked, but the depth of the tradition it represents. For a device this sophisticated to have existed, there must have been craftsmen skilled enough to build it, and a demand for such instruments sophisticated enough to justify their construction. Where are the others? Did they simply not survive? Were they melted down for the bronze when the empires that commissioned them collapsed? Or were they so rare that the Antikythera mechanism is a singular achievement, a path taken once and never followed? The ocean floor gave it up after more than 2,000 years, corroded almost beyond recognition. The patient work of scholars over more than a century has restored its logic and revealed its beauty. It sits now in a museum in Athens, one of the most remarkable objects in human history, asking a question that we can only partially answer. What else did the ancient world know that we have not yet found? The dancing plague of 1518. In July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg in the Holy Roman Empire, present-day France, a woman named Frau Trophea walked into the street and began to dance. She danced for days without stopping. She could not seem to stop, even when she wanted to. Within a week, dozens of people had joined her. By the end of the month, hundreds of people in Strasbourg were dancing involuntarily in the streets. By some accounts, people were dancing until they collapsed from exhaustion or until they died. The authorities of Strasbourg, following the advice of physicians, initially responded by building a stage and hiring musicians, their theory being that the best treatment for dancing fever was more dancing to work it out of the body. They brought in professional dancers to guide the sufferers. This made things considerably worse. The dancing gradually subsided over the late summer and autumn of 1518. It is estimated that several dozen people died as a result of the episode, from heart failure, stroke, or exhaustion and dehydration. Over the weeks it lasted, the dancing plague of 1518 is not unique. Similar episodes of mass involuntary dancing were recorded in medieval Europe in 1374, 1375, and other years. Historians have studied it seriously as a genuine historical event, drawing on contemporary accounts from chronicles, guild records, and city council minutes. This happened. Multiple independent observers recorded it. The most widely accepted explanation involves a combination of mass psychogenic illness, what was formerly called mass hysteria, and the specific social and religious conditions of early 16th century Strasbourg. The city was under severe stress. Famine, plague, and syphilis had killed thousands in the preceding years. The region had a strong tradition of veneration of Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, and a widespread folk belief that Saint Vitus could curse people with involuntary dancing as punishment for sins. Under this framework, the extreme psychological stress of the population combined with a powerful culturally shared belief that such a curse was possible may have triggered a cascade of psychogenic responses. One person, possibly genuinely distressed, began to dance compulsively. Others, already primed by fear and the St. Vitus tradition, unconsciously followed, their bodies responding to a shared cultural script that provided a channel for unbearable stress. The authorities' decision to provide music and a stage may have socially legitimized the behavior and encouraged more people to join. This explanation is supported by the patterns of other mass psychogenic episodes documented in history and in the modern world. Events in which groups of people in high-stress environments experience genuine, involuntary physical symptoms that spread through communities via psychological and social contagion. Such events are real, documented, and deeply strange. They remind us that the line between individual psychology and social experience is far more permeable than we normally assume, and that the human body is susceptible to forces that are neither physical nor supernatural in the ordinary sense, but are the product of mind, culture, and the particular chemistry of human beings living close together in frightening times. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse. There are islands off the northwest coast of Scotland in the Outer Hebrides that are called the Flannan Isles. They are small, rocky, and battered by some of the most ferocious weather in the North Atlantic. In 1899, a lighthouse was built on the largest of the islands, Eilean Moor. It was staffed by a rotating crew of 3 keepers at a time. In December 1900, the lighthouse went dark. When a supply vessel reached the island on December 26th, the crew found the lighthouse in a deeply strange state. The beds were made, a meal was partially prepared, the food still on the table, the clock on the wall had stopped. 2 sets of oilskins, the waterproof gear lighthouse keepers wore in bad weather, were hanging in their usual place, suggesting their owners had not been wearing them when they left. 1 set was missing, suggesting one keeper had gone out in foul weather in a hurry. The lighthouse log's last entry, made on December 15th, 11 days earlier, noted violent storms and unusual conditions, but gave no hint of the crisis that followed. And all 3 lighthouse keepers, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, were gone. The island was searched. Nothing, no bodies, no signs of violence, no note. The lamp mechanism was in working order, wound up, and ready to run. It simply had not been lit. The most widely accepted explanation involves the cliff area below the lighthouse on the western side of the island where the keepers had been doing maintenance work. The west coast of Eilean Moor is exposed to the full force of Atlantic storms coming out of the open ocean, and the cliffs there have been photographed with massive boulders displaced by wave action, evidence of waves of extraordinary extraordinary power. The theory is that two of the keepers were working near the cliff when an unusually large wave struck, washing them into the sea. The third, missing his oilskins, may have heard something and run out to help, only to be taken by a subsequent wave. This explanation is reasonable. It is consistent with the physical evidence, and yet the precise circumstances why all three were at the cliff simultaneously, why the log entries in the days before the disappearance described such distress without clearly stating what was wrong, are not cleanly established. The lighthouse still stands. It is automated now. No human keeper has been required since 1971. But on dark winter nights, when the Atlantic sends its storms against those western cliffs and the waves come in with enough force to move boulders across the stone, the island keeps its silence as faithfully as it always has. Sleep paralysis. Across cultures and centuries, people have described a particular experience that occurs in the liminal state between waking and sleep. You are in your bed. It is night. You become aware that you are conscious, that you can think and see the room around you, but you cannot move. Your limbs will not respond. You cannot speak. You cannot turn your head, and in many cases there is a presence, a weight on your chest, a figure in the corner of the room, something crouching at the foot of the bed or sitting on your sternum, a sense of threat so immediate and physical that people have described it as the most frightening experience of their lives. In English folklore, this experience was called being ridden by the old hag. In Japanese tradition, it is kanashibari, bound by metal. In Newfoundland, the old hag comes by night and presses upon the chest. In Zanzibar, it is popobawa. In Brazil, the pesadelo. In virtually every culture that has been documented, there is a name for this experience and a supernatural entity associated with it. The scientific explanation for sleep paralysis is well established. During REM sleep, the stage in which most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain actively paralyzes the body's voluntary muscles. This prevents us from physically acting out our dreams. The mechanism is so effective that it remains in place for a few seconds to a few minutes after we wake, creating the experience of being fully conscious but unable to move. During this transitional state, the brain is still partially in dream mode. Hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid, realistic experiences occurring at the threshold of sleep are common. The feeling of a presence or the vision of a figure arises from the brain's threat detection systems working in partial dream mode. The amygdala activates. The visual cortex, still partially dreaming, generates an image of the perceived threat, and the paralysis of the body means the person cannot flee or fight, which amplifies the terror considerably. This is a fully understood and scientifically mapped experience, and yet knowing exactly how it works does not make the experience of having it any less terrifying. The person lying paralyzed in the dark, feeling something approaching, is having a genuine neurological event. The old hag is not real in the sense that she does not exist outside the person's nervous system, but the experience of her is as real as anything that has ever happened to the people who describe it. Sleep paralysis is one of the most widely shared supernatural experiences in human history. The same darkness, the same paralysis, the same terrible presence across 1,000 years and 100 cultures. The body's own chemistry producing what every generation has interpreted as a visitation from something beyond the ordinary world. We carry in our own sleeping minds the machinery that makes the ghost, and the ghost is very, very old. the Mary Celeste. On December 4th, 1872, the brigantine Dei Gratia was sailing through the North Atlantic east of the Azores when her captain spotted another vessel. She was behaving oddly, moving under partial canvas in a way that suggested nobody was managing her course. The Dei Gratia drew closer. The crew shouted across the water. No answer came. A boarding party was sent over. They found a ship in reasonable condition. No obvious structural damage. Sails partly set, cargo intact. The hold contained 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, largely undisturbed. Food and water supplies were present. The crew's personal belongings were in their cabins. The ship's log was last updated on November 25th, 9 days earlier. By the time she was found, the vessel, the Mary Celeste, had sailed approximately 500 miles with no one at the helm. The captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7, 10 people in total were gone. Not a body, not a sign of violence, not a note. The single lifeboat was missing, suggesting the people aboard had at some point chosen to abandon ship. But why? The vessel was seaworthy. The cargo had not exploded. There was no obvious reason for 10 people to choose an open lifeboat in the North Atlantic over a sound ship. The salvage hearing that followed found no evidence of violence or foul play, but also found no explanation for the abandonment. The most credible explanations center on the cargo. Industrial alcohol, under certain conditions, can produce fumes that, while not explosive enough to destroy the ship, could generate sufficient pressure in the hold to blow open the hatches and release a cloud of volatile gas. If Captain Benjamin Briggs believed his ship was about to explode, he might have made the rational decision to get everyone into the lifeboat and trail it behind the Mary Celeste at a safe distance until the fumes dissipated. A rope securing the lifeboat to the ship might then have parted in rough weather, and the lifeboat would have been set adrift in the open Atlantic with no way to regain the ship. This explanation is plausible. It is not proven. The lifeboat was never found. The 10 people were never found. And the Mary Celeste, who sailed those 500 miles by herself and waited patiently for someone to board her, did not explain herself to anyone. The Hessdalen Lights. In a remote valley in central Norway called Hessdalen, strange lights have been reported in the sky since at least the early 1980s. The lights are not reflections, not aircraft, not simple weather phenomena. They hover in the sky at all times of day and night, sometimes stationary, sometimes moving rapidly, sometimes changing color, white, yellow, red. They have been photographed, filmed, and measured by scientific instruments. And their origin, despite decades of investigation, is not fully established. Between 1981 and 1984, reports from local farmers and residents occurred at a rate of 15 to 20 per week. The Norwegian UFO Association organized a scientific field campaign in 1984, deploying cameras, radar, and instruments. They succeeded in recording the lights on camera on multiple occasions, capturing images of luminous objects behaving in ways inconsistent with aircraft, weather balloons, or other conventional explanations. A semi-permanent scientific observation station called Project Hessdalen was subsequently established in the valley, staffed by researchers from Norwegian universities. Over the following decades, they made hundreds of observations and measurements. The lights, which appear now far less frequently than in the 1980s, perhaps a few times per year, have been captured on radar and on spectroscopic analysis, confirming they are real physical phenomena producing measurable electromagnetic radiation. The leading scientific hypothesis is that the Hessdalen lights are some form of plasma or ionized gas produced by a specific combination of geological and geochemical conditions in the valley. The valley sits over a seam of sulfide ores, and the bedrock contains an unusual concentration of electrochemically reactive minerals. The theory proposes that electrochemical reactions in the rock produce ionized gas that rises through fissures, collects in pockets above the valley floor, and glows due to the ionization energy. The specific combination of conditions in the Hessdalen Valley might make it uniquely prone to this phenomenon. This hypothesis accounts for several features of the lights, but it does not fully explain all of their observed behaviors, particularly their apparent motion and the range of their visual appearances. The Hessdalen lights are perhaps the most scientifically documented unexplained atmospheric light phenomenon in history. They are measured, they are real, and they are still not fully explained. In a field crowded with anecdote and ambiguity, that combination of documented reality and unresolved mystery is genuinely unusual. The valley glows, the cameras record it, the researchers write their papers, and the lights continue to appear, steady and unhurried in a Norwegian sky that has been keeping this particular secret for at least 4 decades. The deep ocean sounds. The ocean is not silent. It is, in fact, an extraordinarily noisy environment, full of the sounds of water moving, geological activity, marine life communicating, ice sheets shifting, and ships transiting. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has deployed a network of hydrophones, underwater microphones across the world's oceans, and these instruments record an enormous amount of acoustic data continuously. In the summer of 1997, those instruments recorded something unusual, a very loud, very low-frequency sound picked up by multiple hydrophones across the Pacific Ocean. It lasted about a minute. It had a distinctive rising quality, a rising frequency that made the NOAA scientists who analyzed it think of a biological sound. Living things make sounds with that kind of rising, expressive quality. Geological events tend to be more abrupt and less varied. The scientists gave the sound a name, bloop. Bloop was, for a time, one of the internet's favorite mysteries. It was intense enough to be detected across a separation of several thousand kilometers, implying a source of extraordinary power, larger than any known animal. The blue whale is the largest animal ever known to have existed, capable of producing calls near 189 decibels, and bloop was louder. Its biological sounding frequency profile, combined with its power beyond anything known to be biological, led some to speculate it came from an unknown creature of enormous size. The explanation, when NOAA scientists revisited bloop in 2012, was considerably less dramatic, but not entirely uninteresting. Further analysis revealed that bloop was almost certainly the sound of an ice quake. The cracking, grinding sound produced when a large ice shelf fractures and begins to move. Icequakes produce complex, variable acoustic signatures that can sound biological to the human ear, and they can be extraordinarily loud in the deep sound channel that allows low-frequency sounds to travel across entire ocean basins. so bloop has an explanation, but it opened a window onto how strange the acoustic environment of the deep ocean truly is, and how much of that environment remains unmapped and unmonitored. Other unusual sounds recorded by NOAA's network, named Train, Julia, Whistle, and Upsweep, have variously been traced to ice and geological processes or remain unexplained. Upsweep, in particular, a persistent narrowband sound that has been detected continuously since 1991 and appears to intensify around the spring and autumn equinoxes, has no fully established explanation. The deep ocean is the largest continuous habitat on Earth and the least explored. More of the ocean floor has been mapped in less detail than the surface of Mars. In that vast, cold, pressurized darkness, there are things that make sounds we have not yet cataloged and processes whose acoustic signatures we have not yet learned to read. The ocean hums, it creaks and clicks and rumbles. Some of what it says we understand, some of it we are still learning, and some of it perhaps we haven't heard yet. The Fermi paradox, the silence of the universe. We end our night's journey, where all journeys eventually lead, in the deepest question of all: are we alone? The physicist Enrico Fermi, eating lunch with colleagues at Los Alamos in 1950, reportedly made a comment that has since become one of the most famous formulations in all of science. The conversation had turned to the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and someone had made the point that the universe is so vast and so old that the probability of other intelligent civilizations existing seemed very high. Fermi thought for a moment, then he asked simply, "Where is everybody?" This is the Fermi paradox. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, most of which appear to have planets. Many of those planets sit in the habitable zones of their stars. The conditions for life, carbon chemistry, liquid water, energy gradients, appear common across the cosmos. Even if only a tiny fraction of those planets developed life, and a tiny fraction of those developed intelligent life, and a tiny fraction of those developed technology, the sheer number of opportunities should have produced civilizations millions or billions of years older than ours, and civilizations that old should have had ample time to make their existence detectable. And yet we look at the sky and we see nothing. We listen with our radio telescopes and we hear almost nothing except for 72 seconds in August 1977. We send our own signals out and hear no response. This silence is one of the most profound mysteries in science, and the proposed explanations are numerous and deeply interesting. Perhaps life is genuinely rare, rarer than the numbers suggest, because the origin of life from chemistry is deeply unlikely, even given favorable conditions, and the emergence of complex intelligent life from simple organisms is rarer still. Earth's development of intelligent life may have required a very specific combination of factors: the moon's stabilizing effect on our axial tilt, Jupiter's gravitational shielding against asteroid bombardment, the specific chemistry of Earth's interior that does not often repeat elsewhere. Perhaps intelligent civilizations are common, but technology-using ones are rare. Perhaps most intelligent species never develop the concept of radio communication, or develop it and turn inward rather than outward, or develop it and find themselves indifferent to broadcasting. Perhaps civilizations exist, but destroy themselves before they become detectable. The same intelligence that builds radio telescopes also builds nuclear weapons, engineers pathogens, and modifies climates. If civilizations reliably collapse a few hundred years after achieving detectability, the chance of two of them existing in the same galaxy at the same time becomes very small. Perhaps we simply have not been looking long enough or in the right ways. 70 years of systematic radio observation out of a universe 400 million times older, using instruments that can only detect specific types of signals, represents an almost inconceivably small surge. A civilization communicating via gravitational waves or neutrinos or some medium of physics we haven't yet discovered would be invisible to everything we currently possess. The Fermi paradox is the mystery that contains all other mysteries. It asks about the meaning of our existence in a universe that, by all the mathematics, should not be this quiet around us. And it is ultimately still unanswerable with current evidence. We are here and the stars are silent. That is what we know. Coming to rest, we have traveled far tonight, across warm oceans and cold mountains, across ancient deserts in the high desert of New Mexico, across a university library in New Haven where a 600-year-old book still keeps its secret, across the Ohio night where a radio telescope listened for 22 years and heard something once that nobody can fully explain. All of these mysteries, the ones with partial answers, the ones with none, the ones slowly resolving, and the ones that may never resolve, are part of the same thing. They are the signature of a universe that is older and larger and more complex than any single mind can hold. They are the places where our knowledge stops and the genuine unknown begins. And the genuine unknown is not something to fear as you lie in the dark. It is the companion of everyone who has ever looked up at the stars and felt the particular wonder that comes with being small in a very large place. You do not need to understand the universe to belong in it. You do not need to solve its mysteries to be safe within them. The ocean is deep and the sky is enormous and the mountains keep their secrets. And none of that requires anything of you tonight except the willingness to rest. Let your breathing be the only sound now. Let the weight of your body release completely into whatever is holding you. Let the mysteries settle around you like the quiet of deep water. Not pressing, not demanding, simply there the way questions are simply there, patient, gentle, holding their secrets without malice. The Bermuda Triangle is out there in the warm Atlantic, deep and patient. The mountains of the northern Urals stand in their silence. The desert of Nazca waits in its dry quiet under a sky full of stars it has watched for 2,000 years. The Beinica Library has its book. The book has its pages. The pages have their script, and the script says something that nobody alive can hear. The Big Ear listened for 22 years and heard something once. The valley in Norway glows. The ocean hums. And somewhere in the field of your sleeping mind, the questions are resting now too. Not as anxieties, not as puzzles demanding solution, but as points of light in a dark sky. Stars of the unknown, beautiful in their distance, comfortable in their mystery. You don't need to solve anything tonight. The mysteries will be here when you wake, patient as they have always been. They have waited centuries, and they will wait a little longer. Close your eyes now. Let the deep quiet of unexplained things settle over you like the softest possible weight. Let the ocean carry you. Let the mountains hold you. Let the desert spread out in your imagination, pale and ancient and still, under a sky full of stars and drawings no one fully understands. And let all of it be completely and perfectly fine. Mystery is not something to fear. It is where the wonder lives, and the wonder is very much alive. Sleep well. If you are still with us and haven't yet drifted off, there is plenty more waiting for you in the next video whenever you're ready. And if tonight's journey through the unexplained brought you any peace or wonder, we would be so grateful if you shared this video with someone who might need a quiet place to rest their mind. A like, a subscription, or a comment in the section below all help us reach more people who are searching for this kind of calm. We truly appreciate every one of you who finds their way here. This channel exists because of you, and we hope it gives back something like the peace you deserve. Good night. May your dreams be full of gentle mysteries, and may you wake curious. Sleep Videos TV, your ultimate escape to deep, restful sleep.